Okay, hello everyone. This is Ray Lutz with Citizens Oversight. I'm here with Lance Smith. Now, Lance, we're going to do a Snapshot Protocol updated tutorial. Lance, where are you located?
San Francisco Bay Area.
Okay. So what county are you in, though?
San Francisco.
Okay, so you're in San Francisco County.
But I'm volunteering for the Kenneth Mejia campaign in Los Angeles District 34 for congressional seat, U.S. House of Representatives.
Oh, okay. So that's what I thought it was down there in Los Angeles. Okay, so that's good because I know a lot about Los Angeles. Now we want to give a little bit of an update here with what the Snapshot Protocol is all about. Basically, in a nutshell, what we're doing with the Snapshot Protocol is we are very carefully watching the audits that are required by law in California. They're called a 1% manual tally. And they can be pretty good if they're actually implemented correctly for our purposes to try to guarantee that there's no big fixes to the election. Unfortunately, most of these counties don't implement them correctly, at least from our point of view. And there's a lot of actual downright wrong stuff that's going on, especially in Los Angeles. And what I want to do is look over this diagram here. Now, I know that in this mode of recording that you can see my cursor in the recording, so I'm just going to use that to point things out.
All right.
Okay. So essentially, what we're talking about is there are several steps of the actual process of voting. Now, we're doing this on March. Let's see, what's the date today? March 27th, Monday. And when is the election coming up, Lance?
Tuesday, April 4th.
Okay, Tuesday, April 4th. Now, in Los Angeles and California cities, you can vote by mail in advance. So, in Tuesday, April 4th, let's look at the calendar. They get to start counting ballots even before today. So today is the 27th of March. The election is the 4th, which is like a week from tomorrow. They've actually started counting last week. And obviously you weren't really doing anything last week because you didn't know about that. But it's really best if we are on top of things earlier than right now. But we'll do our best, okay? Now, they start counting the early vote by mail ballots, and I'm representing that here in the sort of light blue color. You can see early vote by mail. Let me zoom in a little bit to this first part up at the top here. Okay, so this example that I'm showing here is actually for San Diego. It's very much like Los Angeles, except Los Angeles is way bigger. But in this election, I don't know, this is somewhat of a special election, so they're only talking, what's on the ballot? Just this one race or what?
Just this one race.
Okay, so the number of precincts is going to be significantly smaller for Los Angeles and easier to deal with, and so that's going to be good. Los Angeles typically has, I think it's 5.5 million voters. It's the largest district in the nation, and they have 4,400 precincts or something like that. So if you're in
this specific election is so it's 800,000 people. The District 34. Okay. That's the population for this district.
Right. So they're all going to be about the same if they're a representative, and it's a House of Representatives race, correct? Congress?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so those are supposed to be population the same, more or less. And then the number of precincts, if it's 800,000, usually precincts, you'd have to see how many do you happen to know how many precincts are involved?
I looked at the report. It's about 34 pages.
Okay. Well, that's
So it's I don't have the number off the top of my head, but it's definitely a lot.
Let's make an estimate. Precincts are probably around let's say 400, and if that's the case, if you have 800,000, you'd have let's see how many. If there's 400, let's do that this way. I'll just get the calculator up here. 800,000 divided by, let's just estimate let's be more optimistic. There's 500 in a precinct, 1,600 precincts. Actually, it's very, very comparable to San Diego. San Diego has almost exactly that number of precincts. Okay.
Okay.
So it is, in the last election, there was 1,522 precincts. So you're going to be able to look at this almost as an exact example from, estimate here of how many precincts you have. But if there isn't, then you do it accordingly. Now, the first ballots that come in are the early vote by mail ballots. These are the people that vote early and mail their ballot in before election day or take it in. And then they can start counting up to 10 days before the actual election date. And they keep the actual count sequestered so no one theoretically knows what it is. But they actually do scan them ahead of time.
Okay.
And so it's good to have people in there early watching them. It's very, very important to have eyeballs in there watching. You can watch what they're doing in the public areas and pretty much see and understand what's going on. The next thing that happens is on election day, you get the polls ballots in, which are from polling places. Okay.
Right.
And then there's actually it should say later. They're actually not late. They're the later vote by mail ballots. They're the ones that come in by election day or up to 3 days after election day if they were postmarked on election day, and but were not processed by election night. And
right.
Then the provisionals, which can take much longer in time to process, and those were people who went to the wrong precinct, got a different ballot. So for some reason, their eligibility is in question. And most of those are allowed. It's usually like 90 to 95% of the provisionals are validated eventually. Okay, now on election night, and this doesn't show the time, but the first things that come in is the early vote by mail ballots, then the polls ballots, and then the later vote by mails, and then the provisionals. That's the order of processing.
All right.
The election night results, which they sometimes call either the unofficial canvass or the semi-final canvass. Depends on who you talk to. It is not the final canvass, though. And by canvass, that's the word they use to mean the full
tally
of tallying up and totaling up the votes, right?
All right.
And so at the end of election night, they've done the polls and the early vote by mail ballots and not the later or provisionals. So our first step is that in the processing, let's go through that. They bring those ballots and they have them, they scan them. I believe that still they're about to change in Los Angeles. They're still using these really, they look just like a punch card type of ballot. I don't know if you've seen the actual ballot, but they look like a sort of like a punch card. I'll tell you what,
It has the little stick that you poke a hole in your choice, I think, right? Is that what?
They don't. It actually puts a mark on it.
Okay.
Ballots and Los Angeles. We can probably get it in, the Google. We can probably find it. Yeah, here it is.
Okay.
Here is a sample of a ballot, and they're kind of hard to use because they are you have to look at the ballot pamphlet and then find the number and then find the number in here and then darken in the circle. So it's sort of tricky. There's lots of rooms for error. If you
that looks very complicated.
Yeah, it isn't a one-to-one where you just darken the circle right here. You have to put it on this form. And so these little forms here are what come in to their system, and they scan these using high-speed optical scanners. So that's this.
Now, when you say scan, they're not actually creating an image, right?
No.
Okay.
This is the optical scan, not the image scan. So in optical scanning, they're going to have just opto detectors in these columns right here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Looks like 12 columns. And so they have 12 little optical detectors. They have a bright light in there, and they roll this thing through, and they increment it through, click, 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 like this, according to where these little dots are. And then when they line up with this dot, they see if the optical detector, if it has a lot of reflected light or not too much. And so they have a lot of problems. So this is the old school, because they're not imaging a whole ballot. And there's a lot of, like, if you don't quite darken it in enough, or you use reflective pencil, sometimes it'll reflect off and look like a white spot even though it's supposed to be dark. There's lots of things that can go wrong.
Okay.
So anyway, they scan these. They go to the central tabulator file. At the end of election night, there is what we call the snapshot file. All right. This is all the precincts involved. And the snapshot file, what you want to get is a precinct by precinct listing. It's a fairly big file usually in terms of number of bytes and characters in the file. Usually the way it's published is in a comma-separated values, kind of a character-separated values file. And they're usually on the order of a couple hundred megabytes, okay? And the formats I've seen, they're also very, very sparse in terms of the amount of, lots of redundancy. But we have a program that can pull out the precincts that we're interested in. So if you have what San Diego has, which was 1,522 precincts in the last election, then they choose 16. These are the actual 16 chosen in the primary election in San Diego, just to give you an idea. It's not too many. It's only 16, it's 1%. So you don't get very many samples here. So it's really, really key that before they choose the samples, which ones are going to choose, that you get your hands on the snapshot file of all the precincts. Otherwise, if you have a compromised official or worker or blackmailed person, whatever, I'm not saying that they're intending to do this, but they're forced to for some reason, perhaps, is that if they fixed an appreciable number of these precincts to flip the election, and the flipping would occur like this: if you modified out of the 1,500, maybe 1,000 precincts, so that out of those 800,000 voters, those are the number of people in the district. That's not going to be the number of voters, by the way. So that's going to be probably a lot less than that, maybe half. Okay, and so so that's going to change the outlook. But whatever the number is, you go in and you flip. Let's say we're still working with 1,600 precincts, and let's say you flipped 1,000 of them by only 10 votes. So it wouldn't be something that you could detect very easily just by saying, well, how did this precinct vote this time versus last time? You wouldn't really see the 10 vote change. But it's a flip, so it actually accounts for 20 votes because it's different. Like, let's say your candidate was able to do a really good job of getting 10 more voters to come to the polls. Then they got 10 more votes. But this also, in the flip, also the other guy gets 10 less votes. So it's almost like you got 20 more people to come to the polls. That's how much difference it makes. So it's a 10 vote flip, which is like a 20 vote raw difference. And then you do that with 1,000 precincts, and you've got 10 to 20,000. You got 10,000 votes flipped, and then you can change the election. And that's the kind of thing that we're trying to find. We're trying to find a major vote flip. We're not necessarily trying to find an incremental little 1 votes here or 2 there, even though that can be important, but not in this process. This process is to make sure they're not doing the big thing. So we get, at the end of election night, we have to get this snapshot file with all the precincts listed, vote by vote, candidate by candidate. Not going to be that big for you because you only got 1 race. And so you're going to have just 1 race with all the precincts and the candidates. So it's not going to be too big. Then,
so let me just interrupt for a sec. So how does one obtain the snapshot file?
Well, typically, in general, we have to ask for it. I believe that in Los Angeles, they provide it on their website, but it's something that we'll have to check on.
Okay.
Okay. In many places, we have to ask for it, and sometimes they're uncooperative. But it should be something that we can get, because this is what we use, what they have to use to actually do their manual tally, and it's supposed to be a public process. So
okay.
So then we get that. Now, typically, we either transfer it, or we get a CD, or we upload it, or we ask them to upload to the server. Somehow we get it, and then we secure that so that they can't change it. That's also important, because let's say we didn't get it, and then they selected these precincts. They could go back in and unfix. Let's say that some of the precincts hit the 1,000 that they changed. Then they could go in and unfix the precincts, the very few that we picked, and make those look good, and then the manual tally would look fine. Turns out in Los Angeles, they don't even have to do that because of the way they handle their manual tally. I'll tell you that in a second. So here we have this file. Now, step 2, they're supposed to secure the ballots, and we kind of have to make sure that the ballots are secured somehow. If they can go in and just modify the ballots at will, then that's not. Usually they do a good job of securing them. But it's a good idea for you to see, okay, are the ballots secured? Then there is a choosing of precincts, and at this point, Los Angeles, they choose precincts using this sort of a raffle mode, where they put all of the precincts that are of interest, like these numbers right down here. Let me zoom in a little bit. These are actually the sequence numbers, the 1 through 40 and so forth, all the way down to 1,600 on 1 row. So each one of these little boxes is a precinct. And they would have a slip of paper for each one of these with the number on it. And they put that in a big, they put them out on the table first so you can see them all. Then they put it into a you know, one of these.
A lottery,
and then they choose
bucket, whatever you call it.
They choose them out. And we actually don't prefer that method because there's too much room for manipulation. We'd rather just have a list and dice rolls because it's very hard to fix that. But regardless, it turns out they're fixing it later, so it doesn't really matter what they do up front. But they make a big theater about it, and you can go in there with a video camera and video record it. And then they've chosen the precincts. Again, you want to have the snapshot file secured and in your hand, if possible, before they do the precinct selection. Then they can't go back and change them. Then what they do is they do the manual tally. So they have people in a room, a whole bunch of teams, and they usually have 4 people on a team, and they sit there at a table, and I'll show you back here. They'll have a table set up with a couple of observers, and then usually, I think they usually only have 3. They have a person here, they might use 4, and then they take a stack and they put it into piles about who's selected. Now this will go pretty fast for, I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah, you can, I mean, I can sort of make it out.
Yeah, I see there's some reflection here. But essentially, it's going to go pretty fast because you only have one race. So they're just going to be selecting the main one and then putting it into the piles based on, you know, candidate A, candidate B, candidate C. You know, it will be lickety split. They just pile them up, then count how many is in each pile. But here's the thing. What Los Angeles does, and this is what we need to have somebody in there to really check on this, is if they compare with basically the 16 precincts that they've chosen, or whatever the number is for Los Angeles, they compare that with the manual tally result for that precinct. If it's within just a vote or 2, then they actually report on it as a variance, okay? If it doesn't match by more than just a vote or 2, then they take that precinct and rescan it, get a new report, and then compare with the new report.
And can I just ask, so what is the purpose of the initial scan of the ballots? Is it to detect errors or omissions or duplicate votes?
No, the initial scan of the ballots is to count the votes. Is to get.
Okay, so it is actually counted. I mean, when at the polling place, when do they feed it into a scanner at that point, or
No.
did they just drop it into a box?
Well, they have at the polling place, they have a little scanning device that doesn't actually count anything, and all it does is check the bubbles to see if you have any overvotes or votes that don't follow the rules that they're using, and then they okay, or you didn't vote for this race. You know, in this case, it would be very simple. You have one race, but if you vote for more than one, then that's an overvote, and so it would say, okay, you voted for more than one. Then it would it could reject it and say, do you want to vote for more than one? Because then your vote will be invalid. And the person would say, yeah, I do, and they would still take it. But if you usually the person's going to say, oh, I'm sorry, I must have hit that one. I didn't erase it right or something. And I say, okay, well, let's spoil that ballot. You start with a new one and vote fresh. And now don't hit anything else, or it's going to invalidate it. So basically, that's what happens at the polling place. And the vote by mail voter, they get a ballot in the mail and they fill in the bubbles. There is no checking. The ballot comes in the mail. right? They do a signature comparison to check to see if it's that voter and if they're allowed to vote and so forth. Then they separate the ballot from the voter, and then they scan those as the vote by mail, early vote by mail. These are the only portion that's included in this first set. All right.
All right.
So that's the reason for scanning to begin with, is to actually extract the vote from the ballots. And it's for all the ballots go through the same scanners. What's happening down here is they take a sample of the original ballots, the precincts, they pull them out of their stock room, and then they hand them to people, and they actually manually look at them and hand count them. And then they compare with, on these very few cases, they compare with the machine result, which we're calling the snapshot file. But there's only...
Oh, okay, that makes sense now. Now it can make sense what that snapshot file is.
The snapshot is actually the actual total number of votes for each one of these precincts for the polls and the early vote by mail, but not these other groups. And so that's why we have a little bit of a beef with how they're doing it right there. They're leaving out quite a number of ballots from the scrutiny of this manual 1% manual tally. But here's the point I was trying to make, is that if they take one of these precincts here, manually tally it, and if it's within just a few votes of the machine result, one of these 16 precincts, then they accept it but report a variance. If it's a long way off, they bring it to this other room. They have people accentuate the marking, enhance the little marks so that they make sure they go through the scanner correctly. Then they rescan it, get a new file, and compare with not the old file, but the new file. And this is what we really don't like in their system. Let me give you an analogy to that. Let's say you were trying to check your production line of television sets, and you have 1,522 television sets on the production line. That's the number of precincts here. And you say, in order to check the quality of my TVs, I'm going to check 1% of them at random. So you pull these 16 off the production line. Some of them are okay, but some of them fail really badly. So you fix them. And then you check them again, and now they work. And then you say, okay, the whole production line is fine. But actually what you did there was you proved that you have a big problem with your production line. If you actually found some that didn't work, fixed them, and then now they work, that doesn't mean the production line is all fixed. That means that only those TVs that you tested are fixed. What they do is they take any set of any precincts that don't match very much when they do this manual tally. And the result of the manual tally, when they compare it with the computer report, if it doesn't compare very well, then they rescan it, get a new computer report sitting over here, and then they compare it again with the new report. So if you were a hacker, a nefarious worker or something, and you decided that you wanted to fix the election, you could change thousands of precincts and flip them by 10 votes each, which would exceed their thing. And then what they would do is they would, anytime they found that, they would run it back through and they would cover it up.
And they would say, "Oh, it's fine because we compared it to our new file." So I mean, they should be comparing. They should be comparing the new result to the old snapshot file, correct?
Right. That's true. And so they're not doing it right. So that's the reason that we come in. That's the reason that we need to be there, because we know they're doing this wrong. What we do when they get done with their manual tally result, we have to take a look at the actual vote count and compare that with our snapshot file, which is the original report. Okay? So we do a comparison of the original report. And then they produce this manual tally result here. This is their report. Then what we do is we compare, this is really us here, comparing with the 16 precincts from the snapshot file to see if they've cheated like this, because we know they do. The other way they cheat in Los Angeles is they don't include the later vote by mail or provisionals, which is usually about 40% of the ballots from the audit. This is what we sued San Diego over and won. And now we're appealing so that it covers all of the counties. We might want to send a letter from Citizens Oversight to Los Angeles and, reminding them that they need to do not just this initial set, but also the later vote by mails and provisionals and the 1% manual tally. In this election, it should be, much easier for them to try to actually do it right and include all those, because they don't have the vast number of races to compare like they did in the last election. They had, dozens of races to go through.
Bunch of ballot measures, initiatives. The same thing in San Francisco. We had, I think we had 28 local city initiatives, and then all the state, and then all the Canada.
Yeah, so it gets
overwhelming.
And that's what really makes it hard. Now, San Francisco is not anywhere close to this problem that we have here in Los Angeles because it's so much smaller. The big counties in California are first Los Angeles, second is San Diego, and then Sacramento, Orange County, and Riverside. So if you just took the Southern California counties, it's more than half of the ballots are in just the four, Los Angeles, San Diego, Riverside, and Orange County are more than half of the state. It's really lopsided because they're big. So that is something. So what you need to do, what we need to do, and we can help you out with this, is we need to ask for and find out where we're going to be able to get the snapshot file, because we need to have that, because we know now already that how they have set this up so that it covers up any hacking that's done. But we know how to do it so that if they do happen to catch, there's three things that are necessary to catch this. Number one, you have to get the snapshot file before they do the random selection. We have to have the file in our hands and know that it's frozen and unchanging before they choose them. And that also implies that they choose them after we have the file. Some counties choose the precincts before the election.
Fresno, that can't be happening.
Fresno,
that's definitely the wrong way to do it. I mean, even as a beginner, I would recognize that.
Well, Fresno does it 2 months before the election and publishes it on their website, which ones they're choosing. Well, if you're a hacker, then that makes it
well, that makes it really easy. Like you can really plan ahead.
Yeah,
for your hacking adventures.
If you're a hacker, you just avoid the ones that they've told you, and you'll never be caught. The other problem is in counties like Sacramento, they don't choose them randomly. They choose them according to the ones they like. And so, again, you could just choose the one that they that are going to avoid their hacking. And then, so we need to have the snapshot file before the random selection. And the key thing here is not so much that these are all randomly distributed, but it has to be a surprise. Random means it's a complete surprise. You can't predict which ones will be selected. Then it's good to watch the manual tally a little bit, although I have no real problems with how they're actually extracting the vote by hand from these ballots. The problem is that if they come up a little bit wrong, they run them back through the scanner, generate a new file. And this is when, at the end of the manual tally, when we get the report, we have to compare that with the snapshot file. And this is the snapshot protocol in that we have to usually tell them in advance that we want to get the snapshot file and make sure that it's available. I believe that in Los Angeles, they publish it on their website. So that's fairly easy. We want to then have somebody go into the random selection meeting and video record it if possible. They do allow that in Los Angeles. Third thing is we want to watch what they're doing. They produce a very good manual tally report in Los Angeles. And then what we have to do, though, is compare the snapshot file with the chosen precincts in their actual tally. So what we do is we take the 16 precincts out of the snapshot file, or whatever that number is, and we compare with, this is stuff that we do, we compare with the manual tally result. We have to have in the manual tally result not just the number of ballots, we have to have the actual vote. And this is what a lot of them don't provide. San Diego doesn't provide the actual vote. Now, I believe that Los Angeles provides the actual vote count within each precinct. And that's what we want to get. You know, you could have the same number of ballots, but as I say, if you flipped it, if you flip one candidate for the other, the number of ballots looks perfect. But then,
right.
And the flipping would not be noticed because they rescan them, get a new report, and they say everything's fine. And they don't even report on it. They do have to report, you know, they're not going to say there's a variance, there's no difference in the number, but we need to get the vote count for each one of the precincts that they tally. We get the precincts out of the snapshot file, compare, and that's when we got them in a headlock if they've done something wrong. So that's in essence.
And so sorry. So this is something that you will be able to help us with?
Yeah, we can help you with it.
Oh,
it's
awesome.
not that hard because I mean, we can't do, well, we have people, do you have any volunteers in the LA area? Of course.
Yeah, so right now we're in the process of getting together at least 100 volunteers for the purpose of poll monitoring and possibly observing the check-in center, the bag transport, the vote tally, and possibly even exit polling, although I know that's probably a massive venture that requires a lot more planning.
Yeah, so right now, if possible, you need to have several volunteers go into the office and start watching because they're working on this election right now.
For the mail-in ballots.
The mail-in ballots. And they need eyes in there. They're not doing the manual tally yet, but you know, a set of eyes is one of the most psychologically active images. And in studies, for example, they just put they photocopy a set of eyes and they put them next to the coffee nook, you know, where you're supposed to donate 50 cents for a coffee or something. And just a photocopied set of eyes made it the donations like go up 3 times. So it is extremely psychologically active. Having people in there watching is very important, even if they don't do anything. And you never can tell what you're going to find. We find stuff all the time that is you know, out of line. But it doesn't take a huge amount of smarts just to watch. You know, not by smarts, but just you know, previous experience to understand what's going on if you just go in there and start watching. But don't let them tell you they're not doing it, because they are. They're scanning these right now. And I've had them tell me, oh, we're not scanning those, we don't do it until election night. No, they're doing it up to 10 days in advance, and they start doing it. And so you need to have people in there, if possible, watching that. And then it's usually the day after the election is when they do the random selection, the choosing of the precincts. And we need to have people with video cameras in there watching that. I really want to, I have some people also that have done this before that can help with the oversight if they're available.
Oh, great.
In the LA area. Okay, so
that would be terrific.
Yeah. And so it's good also for them because they're trying to watch really big elections, and this one is kind of smaller and easier to deal with. And so what we need to do though is right now is, if you can, get your people to start going in and seeing what's going on. Find out if they're scanning. Someone says, no, they're not scanning yet. Don't take their word for it. Say you want to see the scanning in the room anyway. They probably are. You don't get the result yet. It goes into their computer in a way that that's supposed to be that no one can tell what's there. And then we notify them that we want the snapshot file, and we get it. We have to, if they post it to their website, this is a very easy thing. And from my memory, I think that's what they do.
It could be, because it seems like they're pretty transparent with a lot of the, they publish the calendar of exactly what each stage of the canvas and every stage of the process. So I mean, I was pretty impressed with the transparency of at least what they make available on the website.
Right, but here's the thing, that everything looks transparent. But
Yeah, right.
Is they're actually telling you, yeah, we're going to do this manual tally. What they're not telling you is that they're leaving out these other form ballot types from the manual tally. You see them dutifully tallying these things, and it looks like a lot of work and stuff, but unless you really look carefully and ask a bunch of questions, you'll never find out that they're leaving out 40% of the ballots. Okay.
Right.
And then you never will find out unless you do a lot of checking and asking questions. But they admit this, that they go back and rescan the bad precincts and then compare with the new report. So there's a lot of things that are not up and up with what they're doing, not transparent, even though from, you know, I think Los Angeles, they do make a real, I'll give them a few attaboys here. One, I think they do publish a snapshot file on their website prior to the selection process. And if they do that, then some of our work is not, doesn't exist. But citizens oversight, they know who we are. They know that we've taken other counties to court. And so we may want to ask them to actually make sure that their later and vote by mails and provisionals are included in the manual tally process.
Is that required by law at this point, or is it just sort of on their radar that people are hoping for that kind of more comprehensive sample count?
Well, we took San Diego to court and we won our case. So that is...
They're on notice. They're on notice, at least.
So, yeah. So they're on notice that, well, it doesn't apply to them necessarily because, oh, we have a new person came in. Who is that? Is that... let me see if I can tell who the is.
I don't know who that is.
Owner. I don't know who owner is. Owner, who are you? Can you say something? I don't hear anything. Okay, well, let us know, and if you ever get your audio working. Okay, so basically, Lance, the going back to what we're talking about, LA and the manual tally and whether they have to do both the election night results and the later vote by mails and provisionals. That's something, as I say, that we won in our court case here in San Diego. So San Diego, we have a judgment against San Diego that they have to do at least the later vote by mails. And in our judgment, they do not include the other 10% of provisionals. We're appealing it based on the fact that we think the provisional should be in, and logic for them not including them is just completely,
BS.
It's ridiculous, because what they said was, their argument was that we wanted even the non-validated, unaccepted provisionals to be included, when we never said that. We said we were wanting them to manually tally the accepted provisionals, not the ones that were rejected. However, we wouldn't actually mind them to audit the ones that were rejected too. I mean, that doesn't mean that's not a good idea to do that. So at this point, though, the ruling here in San Diego only applies to San Diego. It doesn't automatically get propagated to all.
Right. It's just San Diego Superior Court, probably, right?
Until it goes through the appeals court level. And once it goes through the appeals court level, then it applies to all counties. So it's being appealed now. It's probably going to take 18 months or something to get through that process. Meanwhile, I know the election officials like to water down this manual tally. And so they're going to be probably pushing for legislation to only require the early vote by mail-in polls ballots to be included. And the logic for that, it doesn't make any sense, but sometimes legislators don't do logical things. That's the state of affairs right now. And even though this case doesn't automatically apply to Los Angeles, we can still take them to court and go through the same process we did with San Diego and in the lower court level and push the case there. So they'll be threatened with a lawsuit, if they don't do it, even though the appeal doesn't apply to them. We'll say, if
right,
then we may wind up taking you to court like we did San Diego.
I mean, the threat of a victory in co-pending litigation in a neighboring county can be a pretty good motivator or a threat.
Right, and so they're already very well aware of our case and who we are and so forth. So I think that it may be a pretty good tool. I would also just like to talk to Dean Logan, because he's the Registrar of Voters in Los Angeles. He's also now the head of CACEO, which is the California Association of Clerks and Election Officials, CACEO, and that's the association of election officials, basically, that get together and push for legislation from their point of view, which a lot of times doesn't make any sense. It's they're trying to water down these audits, which what they should be wanting to do is just realize what's the right way to do it and then try to do it correctly. And their claim,
from what I've seen, it's like a lot of the election officials have a vested interest in making sure that no one can scrutinize the process or the results.
Right, and that's what we're seeing, and in San Diego is really bad. We're still working on it. But I think here in Los Angeles, we have a couple of things, as I say. The snapshot file, I believe, is easily available on their website after election night. Okay, and it only includes the first two. They make a very good report. The manual tally report, I believe, from Los Angeles does include the vote totals for each race in each precinct. And so we have our work reduced there because they're making a good report, unlike other counties like San Diego. And then we can very easily pull out the 16 precincts just for this one race and compare with their result to make sure that they're not going through this process of fixing them, even if there's just one, because the chance of hitting, if they modified a whole bunch of these precincts, we're only going to have a small chance of hitting it. Those, if they, out of 1,500, if you fixed 1,000, we may not hit the 1,000 that they fixed. With 1%, I think you have a pretty good chance of hitting at least one of 1,000 precinct fix. But if we find one that they run back through, then we should cry foul, because that means that they may have fixed a lot more.
Okay.
And then it may be the fact that we might want to go in and actually look at the ballots in more detail. Those are supposed to be, we're still pushing on that to make them, they're supposed to be public documents, but they seal them up. But we'll get to that point when we get to it. For right now, our work cut out for us is number one for you, your sort of marching orders. See if you can get any of your volunteers to go in and see if what's going on with scanning, opening up the vote by mail ballots, see what's happening. You want,
and I mean, you mentioned that this, I mean, a lot of this is probably common sense. I mean, if, you know, if they're looking at opening envelopes and they're dropping them in the trash and then pulling out some other piece of paper, then, you know, obviously the observer knows there's something fishy going on. But in your experience, what are just some of the, like maybe the top 3 sort of shenanigans that to watch out for?
Well, it's not the easy things to see, actually. I think, like when we go in and we watch what's going on, we think, to me, everything's looking quite nice. What we saw, though, in San Diego was a lot of changing of the vote on the ballots, either by using whiteout tape or enhancing the vote with a marking pen. And that in San Diego has no tracking, no logging, no written procedure, only one person looking at it at a time. It's really far out of what should go on.
So observers actually saw someone take a pen or a whiteout pen and alter a ballot?
Yeah, and they admit that they do this. So it's not like we have to, secretly observe it. We've observed it, we've recorded it, they admit doing it. They don't have any logging, no 2 sets of eyes, and no way for us to tell what happened. And they say that, okay, well, we use whiteout tape and not just whiteout, so you can peel it off to see what's under, but no one does that. So there's no way to really know what they're doing. And to what extent did that affect the primary? That's something that we're really still looking into, because it actually does look very, very fishy. Let me pull up a different graphic here. In the primary, we're still working on that. And basically, if you look at this infographic here, we have time going by from when they first start counting the ballots. They're doing the early vote by mail ballots, and then they do the polls ballots. And this arrow here, this yellow arrow at the bottom, is when at the end of election night they've done around 65% or so of the election is done by the polls and early vote by mail. Then the later vote by mail ballots is around 25%, and the provisionals just over 10%. So you can see, or if you add together 26 and 24, you're at what, around 50% of the election in this primary was vote by mail ballots, and around 40% were the polls, 10% were provisionals, which are also polls ballots. So the polls were about 50%. So it's 50-50 vote by mail versus polls ballots. And notice here that this is the percentages of that Hillary Clinton got in the actual, official results is this line. She got 64% of the early vote by mails, but only 44%. She lost badly at the polls, basically broke even in the later vote by mails, and lost disastrously in the provisionals. So the only time that Hillary Clinton won was in the early vote by mail ballots. And these are the ones that we suspected tampering, because they did not do, they do not sort these by precinct as Los Angeles does. Now, in the other infographic we're looking at, I show here the precincts and that these are darkened because they've selected precincts. And I know that Los Angeles also sorts their vote-by-mail ballots by precinct, and they store them that way. And so therefore, when it comes time to doing the audit, they can just pull out the precinct in the vote-by-mail set and just do those. However, in San Diego, the early vote-by-mail ballots are done by batch. So the ballots come in envelopes, and they stack them up about 200 per tray. Those go through an initial phase of scanning them, just the front of the envelope, look and extracting the signature, and then that goes up to a workstation where there's a barcode on there that says which voter it is. So on the workstation, the worker sees the signature of the voter and some other signatures of the voter from DMV or wherever they have it, and they get to compare and see if they're the same. Sometimes they'll do it completely automatically, but if they don't match, then they have to go through a human eye check. And if they still don't match, then it goes up to the what they call the election board, or the election official will look at the very last one. So they're taken out. Next step is they're taken out of the envelope, separated from the envelope, and placed in trays of 400 batches. But they're mixed precincts. It's just randomly how they got processed. So you have around 400 ballots in a mixed precinct batch. Now at the selection meeting, they chose from the early vote by mail, they had about 720 some odd batches at this point. Polls, they have these in precinct order, they have 1522. So they had, instead of picking precincts because they're not sorted that way, they chose batches. They chose 8 out of the 723, which is 1% of the batches. Everything sounded good, except then that's when we complained and we said, well, wait a minute, what about these later vote by mail batches, and what about the provisional batches? Aren't you going to choose for those? They said, no, we're not. And then that's when we filed our lawsuit, and we won. They have to include the later vote by mails, but at this point, not the provisionals, and that's why we're appealing. However, going back, as soon as we filed our lawsuit and served it on them, they said, oh, we're going to resort these early vote by mail ballots by precinct. So they got a computer report that said where, for each precinct that was selected, which batches had some ballot in there for that precinct. They went in with 40 people for a week and pulled out individual ballots out of the 730 batches to make up the precincts that they were going to choose. And we found that they had these discrepancies in their this will come up in a second. And
just to let you know, Ray, I'm about to have to jump off the call, so okay. I'm not sure if
we're just about done. Let me just show you.
Okay.
This is going to be kind of what we're going to do in your case. So this is going to be instructive. So we had the manual tally ballots cast, the counts for Sanders and Clinton, and the total. And then the snapshot for Sanders, that's 24 should match this manual tally. It's 23, so it doesn't match. The 40 matches. The 64 is off by 1. There was no report on that. Then they did these and they had it off by 2. Here's one that's off by 3, but no report. So this is what we're saying. Look, you didn't report on
yeah.
You had half of them wrong and they were all down. So this is why we went ahead and we actually, in this case, we photographed the tally sheets. Here's an example of them, the manual tally sheets that they had. And we extract the votes here for Sanders by looking at this, because we photographed these. And then, because they didn't report on it, we had to have these counts in order to do our analysis. That's kind of what we want to get from you. Okay, so let's
Right.
long enough anyway. So that ends, I think. Do you have any final questions, Lance?
No, I mean, this is really fascinating, and it's giving me a lot of really good information. What are the next steps for me or the campaign?
Okay, we need to get at least a couple people, and I'll notify my contacts up in the LA area if they can go in at all, to start going in and seeing any scanning going on and what's going on. They'll let you go into the room. You go into the room and they'll show you that they're separating the ballots from the envelopes and so forth. You want to watch that. Next step is we got to get the snapshot file. All right. As I say, I believe that it happens right after the election. And the manual tally report is good. And then all we have to do is compare it. So most of it is almost not that, you can almost do it without a lot of people there, but we need the people there starting right away, and then after election night and on through, to watch what they're doing. Just being there, as I say, set of eyes, really important all the time. And then,
so about how many, so I should try to recruit at least half a dozen or so observers to I mean, if anyone can go in today or tomorrow or anytime this week or before the election, to just get in there immediately and start observing the proceedings.
Yeah, see if they should be receiving the vote by mail envelopes now, and opening them and so it'd be good if people, and I'll let my people know that maybe we can cross fertilize the names and get them to talk to each other, the ones that are going in, because then they can give each other some tips and teach each other right there.
Okay.
But mainly it turns out the snapshot processing, it doesn't take a lot of people to actually do it, because if we get the snapshot file, they have to publish this result and then we can compare it. It isn't what isn't happening, and this is how we can help you, is if we send a letter to the county and say, we understand this election is coming up. We understand that you're not normally doing the later vote by mail or provisionals and your manual tally procedure, and we'd like you to do that because we believe that's what the law says you must do. And it makes sense that you should do it. And I think that it would be good for me, because I would like to have a more detailed discussion with Dean Logan about options for how we would like to work with him in the future, because we would actually like to avoid so much manual tallying and get more data out of the system earlier, such as image scans of the ballots, not this type of ballot, but the regular. They're going to go to the regular type of ballot. We want a full document image scans for the ballots, a full set available so that we can actually look at everything. That's what we want to get. If they do that, then we'd be happy to reduce the requirements for the manual tallying part of it under certain criteria. So for now, getting back to what we need to do, try to get some people, like a half a dozen, that are going to be observers at the central office for watching this. Okay, kind of their.
Okay.
And then they can start now and see what's going on. Tell them not to take no for an answer, because they are scanning right now. They told me before they weren't. I waited until election night and I found out they scanned a lot of them as it was. You're not going to see that much at this point, but as I say, go in, learn what they're doing, It's this manual tallying. We need to have people that are ready to go to video record this choosing of the precincts, the random selection. After we get the snapshot file, we watch this, and then we watch them do the manual tally. We don't have to watch every second.
Right.
Manual tallying people that do it, I have full confidence that they're sitting there and counting them correctly. The secret here is that they're rescanning them and then counting them, comparing them, and getting it to compare right, even when they may have been hacked substantially.
Right. Okay, so my marching orders are to recruit a few people, try to send them in right away. And do you have any kind of observer form template that we would use to note any sort of shenanigans that are happening?
We don't specifically have that, because it really, every place is a little bit different. And what we do have is we have this sort of eyes open, let's say common, let me see, I believe we still have this on the front page of our website. It's the eyes open on the very front page down here, eyes open campaign. And we have the election office, the polling place, the audit oversight.
Okay.
So you can see, I'll send you this link. These are specific, like little things, like when you interact with the election office, get the documents timestamped, notify them of the lawsuit decision, the audit best practices, get an observer badge, start early, 10 days before the election, through final certification, 30 days. So remember, it takes 30 days to get done with these. It's not done at election night. They still have to process
right.
vote by mails. Document the process for vote by mail sorting, signature checking. So you see, this is an example of the sort of checklist that we have. Go into the
Okay, that's great.
Consider the access rules, what you can observe. This was for national, so we had these set up for national as opposed to specifically here. You can go in at the end of the close of the polls, like you can go in there and close the polls. And this is a good idea for your volunteers in the area at their polling place just before the polls close, like at 7:50, to go in there and stay in there during the polls close and watch what goes on as they close the polls. Make sure that everything, this is one of the big areas we've had trouble with, is reconciling the number of ballots, that if the number of ballots matches the number delivered blank, were voted, spoiled, and still blank, those need to all add up and reconcile. And
right,
they don't even spend time to do that, or they get screwed up somehow and they can't figure it out, and they say, screw it, I'm just going to send it in the way it is. And so,
okay. So do you need any? Sorry, do you need any information from me? Like you have my contact information right through the Facebook chat.
Yeah, and I can give you the what we can have your volunteers that are going to work with us is we can have them sign up with us so that we get them paired up, working with other people that have done this sort of oversight before. That'll help too.
Should they do that on your website?
Yeah, I'll give you the link. I'll give you the link to it. It's a sign-up page.
Okay. Okay.
And then we'll be able to get everybody working together on this. Hopefully, we'll have them trade contact information and get to know each other, and decide when to go in. I find you don't have to. Well, the polling place ones are kind of time critical, of course, because it's only on election day that it happens, and then you got to go in at the very end to do the poll closing process. But look at also what we found was the type of materials, voter guides and other materials that were improperly available. There's not supposed to be voter guides, or here's how you should vote at the polling place. We especially found that in churches where they were having people vote inside churches, and the church would have their, recommended voter, guide for their parishioners that were
right, right. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for the presentation. This is just incredible. I can't tell you how grateful I am for this help, and I will connect my fellow volunteers with your sign up page, trade contact information, and if I have any other questions, can I just give you a call on your telephone number?
Yeah, of course. What I was going to say is on our main page, we do have. I was trying to show it to you there. Well, I don't know where it went now, but basically, we do have on the very front page of Citizens Oversight, which is copswiki.org. When you get there. We do have a section where it says sign up, all the things I just showed you, like the Eyes Open campaign, all those little things that you can send around to your volunteers. Here's a checklist of what you want to do. That can be helpful. Okay. All right. So we'll follow up more on the because we're in contact separately. All right. So thanks a lot, Lan.
Okay.
I'm going to end.
Thank you so much, Ray.
Thank you. Bye-bye.